Session pursuant to Standing Order 1083 and the motion adopted by the committee in January. The committee will continue its study on language obligations related to the process of staffing or making appointments to key positions. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. It is an honor to receive them this morning. We have Mr. Raymond Thiberge, the Commissioner of Official Languages, Pierre Leduc, Assistant Commissioner, Strategic Orientation and External Relations Branch, as well as Patrick Wolf for the first time, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance and Enforcement Branch. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here and for participating. This meeting will allow us to start the study that the Commissioner asked of us, but perhaps we will have more details in order to better prepare our study. Mr. Commissioner, as you know, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. We are very strict on time, otherwise I will cut you off because we need to have enough time to interact with one another. Mr. Thiberge, on to you for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members of the committee, good morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the lands on which we are gathered are part of the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinabeg people, an Indigenous people of the Ottawa Valley. As you know, in 2021-2022, following a record number of complaints filed with the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages, I recommended that a study be conducted on language obligations related to the staffing of senior management positions in the federal public service and to governor and council appointments. The idea behind this recommendation was to determine whether knowledge of both official languages should be a requirement when hiring for these types of positions. The study you are undertaking is in response to this recommendation, and I'd like to thank you for it.
Able to speak both official languages is, in my view, an essential skill for any leader, especially those in federal institutions subject to the Official Languages Act. The bilingual nature of an organization depends in large part on the bilingualism of those occupying positions at the highest levels. They need to lead by example and must be able to represent all their employees and Canadians in both official languages. I therefore believe that proficiency in both official languages must become a hiring criterion for senior management positions in the public service and for governor and council appointments. I am pleased with the amendments made by your committee last spring to Bill C-13. Particularly with regard to the language training required to ensure the bilingual capacity of deputy ministers and associate deputy ministers who are newly appointed to the federal public service if they are not bilingual at the time of their appointment. It
will be interesting to see the impact of this change on the public service over the next few years. That said, the job is only half done. In the absence of clear policies and guidelines, how can we ensure that this change will be implemented, measured, and adjusted as necessary? What measures will be put in place to support incumbents when they return from language training to enable them to carry out their responsibilities effectively in both official languages? What will happen in cases where senior civil servants are still unable to master their second official language? I also question the absence of bilingualism in the list of essential criteria for governor and council appointments. As you may know, in recent years, a number of appointments have raised eyebrows among Canadians because no bilingualism criteria were required as part of the appointment process. This has led to a significant number of complaints to my office.
Senior management positions in institutions subject to the Official Languages Act to ensure that a command of both official languages is part of the requirements of these positions. Moreover, the Act did not address current senior public servants at the time of royal assent. But the legislator's intention behind the addition for newly appointed deputy ministers should shine through to all senior management. In my opinion, any leader in the federal public service must be able to express himself or herself in both official languages and understand anyone who speaks English or French in order to promote the use of both official languages and encourage linguistic security in the workplace in the federal public service. This also gives a voice to the issues on the table. Senior management must lead by example and send a clear signal that both English and French have a prominent and equal place in the federal public service so that public servants can flourish in both official languages. It is high time that we act. J'ai confiance que votre étude
I'm confident that your study will shed light on the hiring criteria for senior public service positions and that it will help government decision makers take a closer look. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer your questions in the official language of your choice. Thank you very much, Commissioner. As you know, there will be a number of questions, 6 minutes for each party, and you will be able to interact. We will start with the first co-chair of this committee, and I'd like to highlight the presence of a new member to this committee, Ms. Cusey, who is back and very happy to have you, and Ms. Petrakis from the Liberals. So welcome to our new members. First round of questions, 6 minutes with the first co-chair of the committee, Mr. Joël Godin. On to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. We would have liked to welcome you at 8:15, but it was cold. And I do understand that maybe it's a bit more challenging to be on time at 8:15, but we were here as parliamentarians and we were awake. I'd like to hear you, Mr. Commissioner, on the following. The Official Languages Act was tabled and it received royal assent in June 2023, correct? Still today, you haven't the tools at your disposition in order to provide administrative sanctions. It is enshrined in the law, but the government needs to table a decree. Do you know when you will have the necessary tools in order to work better? We don't have a deadline for now, and I have not been provided with a date. So we don't know when we will receive this decree, which indeed will give the law strength. Is this tool important for you to be more efficient? It is, in my opinion, an essential tool because it will be necessary for transportation. That is an industry that receives a lot of complaints at the Commissioner's office and for many years. You say that the government is delaying in providing this decree. Who at the Ministers' Council must provide the decree? I don't know. Is it the Official Languages Minister or the Treasury Board President? I don't know. It's music to my ears what you're saying. We tabled an amendment so that the Treasury Board be in charge of this law, but the government did not accept our amendment. Now, can you tell me the following? Does the current government respect the law, the Official Languages Act's will with regards to appointments? There's been an adoption of C-13 that was in June last year. I can't say if the most recent appointments respect the law, but they should because the law and the act was adopted in June last year. Some elements will come into force in June 2025, and all public servants will be able to be supervised and work in their official language of choice. But with regards to the actual appointments, I don't know if there have been any to begin with, but I can't confirm or deny that the law or the act is being respected. You must have seen that Radio-Canada showed that there is no fair representation among senior representatives of the public service. There's no 50-50 division between French and Francophones and Anglophones. Will this act force the government from now on to nominate or appoint rather bilingual people? I'm referring, of course, partially to the Governor General, who is bilingual but does not work French, as well as another Lieutenant Governor who is a unilingual Anglophone. Will the act force the respect of bilingualism, French-English bilingualism in Canada. With regards to New Brunswick, they are not subjected to this act. So the simple answer is no. You'll understand that if the Prime Minister of Canada has the legal obligation to do so, they should also have the moral obligation to preach by example. As mentioned in my opening remarks, it's important that any leader in the federal government be able to communicate in both official languages of Canada, and Canadians be able to communicate in both official languages. C-13 does not take into consideration the cases that you mentioned. There are two bills right now, S-220 and S-229, that are going to speak about this, but they are not taking place yet. Do you think that the act has enough teeth? Should we believe that indeed senior government officials will be bilingual at some point? You have less than 30 seconds. I'd say that if we implement the act, the clause 34 with regards to deputy ministers and associate deputy ministers, then the answer should be yes. There are many questions still that need to be clarified with regards to how we implement that clause. Thank you. Mr. Chair, you only have 3 seconds left. Thank you, Mr. Thiberge. I'm going to be tight on time, strict on time, because we want to have 2 rounds of questions. Next, Mr. Francis Drouin and Mr. Daryl Sampson, who will share their 6 minutes. If we do have 2 turns, then we won't need to share our time. So, yes, but the second round will be short. So we will share our time. I will share my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner for being here today. In the interest of transparency, your Assistant Commissioner to your right is fantastic. I don't know the one to your left, but I do know the one to your right. And I would like to thank him for his work personally. But I will be asking you questions through the chair. You sent a letter to the committee to study bilingualism among senior government representatives. About 10, 15 years ago, and I think you referred to this, a senior representative is hired.
Apprennent le français, mais qui...
But who is responsible to say that you're truly bilingual at the end of the day? Do you follow up with senior representatives? Or do they just send you to some sort of a language school and then that's more than enough and nobody actually checks if they're bilingual? If I may, when there's a linguistic training for certain positions, there is testing. So communication, writing, oral expression, and so on. However, verifying the proficiency among senior representatives, I think that there is that to a certain extent, but in this new act, there isn't much about that. A question around about appointments. You talked about bilingualism for the governor and council appointment. I support it in principle. However, how do you ensure that, for example, we might ask you to speak to this later, but there might be pure francophones. For example, in the east of Ontario, there are people who barely speak or who don't speak any English as well. And I'm sure in the west of Canada, there are people who don't speak any French at all. And same in Quebec, people who don't speak any English. How do we make sure that these people can access these positions, especially if you take into consideration the fact that some appointments of course, will serve Canada, but they are actually targeted towards a region or a specific organization with specific targets in some regions. One must remember that regardless of where you are in Canada, there is diversity everywhere in Canada. Diversity is something that can be expressed in both official languages. There is a short-term and a long-term approach. Long-term, we have to make sure that there are second language training opportunities when one is a student. That's long-term. Short-term, offer training to candidates. And Mr. Ferguson was the general auditor. He did not speak French, and then he went through training and did speak French very well in the end. You have to create the environment for them to learn those languages. If we don't recognize that it's possible to become bilingual, then that kind of presupposes that it's not so important. For 50 years, the Act has been in place, and we're still asking the same questions. How come we've been asking the same questions for 50 years? Thank you. I have 2 minutes left, I believe. A minute and a half. But really, there's 5 minutes for the second round. With regards to this study, any measures we need to implement to look into that, what would be the good measures to implement for our committee? First, you need to understand where things are at. There are hundreds of appointments. Is the bilingualism criteria an important one? Is it an asset? Is it a necessary criteria? What is the rhythm at which we are making appointments? And then you have to see what the trend is over a certain amount of time and see who is appointed. There was an article published by Radio-Canada recently. They said that there was a decrease in appointing francophones recently. Is this an anomaly? As Bernard de Rome said, is this a trend that will continue? It is a trend that is declining. Of course, we need the statistics. We also need to speak to those who manage those appointments. We need to, and these are the same people that are in charge of the senior appointments. Next question from the second co-chair from the bloc, Mr. Beaulieu, for 6 minutes. Thank you. I'd like you to tell me more about the current state of affairs. Let's talk about the RCMP. There was the appointment of unilinguals in supposedly bilingual positions, senior positions. The RCMP chief said that there is no essential position in Quebec that is francophone, and he does not understand it himself. He said he doesn't know why there are unilingual positions in Canada but not in Quebec. Maybe you can expand on that. With regards to the RCMP and senior officials, it's quite concerning. They have training programs in place, and we can, of course, always say that operational capacity is an issue, and that's a good excuse. And that is one of the impediments to having training in a certain language. The RCMP is an institution which for a long time has had difficulty respecting its official language's obligations, whether it's with regards to their communication with the public and training with among their employees. This is a cultural issue at the heart of the RCMP. I will soon the RCMP commissioner shortly, And I will ask why it's so difficult for them to respect that. There seems to be a decline because there isn't even any training in French. It's either bilingual or English. This is an interesting situation, and I'd like to highlight it. Some young cadets don't speak English because they go to and then they go to Regina. So the RCMP works a lot in the West and in the Maritimes. In the West, they work in English most of the time. So we have to offer this training for cadets from Quebec. However, the training needs to be done in French. So this is an ongoing situation. It has been ongoing for a while. You said you don't want to speak to whether or not the government is respecting the spirit of C-13. Recently, we saw that the percentage of Francophones that are appointed in key positions and political appointments had declined to record levels. This has to do with what you said about bilingual positions. It seems that there is no political will since there is a decline.
C'est un chiffre qui me préoccupe.
As I was saying, is it an anomaly, or is this a trend that will go up or that will go down? So when you make observations of this sort, you can say, well, this year we did not do the necessary number of appointments, but it's about the trend, and it's a very worrying trend. Another factor that impacts Quebec, because we were saying that the federal government has acknowledged that it has a responsibility of defending French in Quebec as well, but in federal institutions in Quebec, for instance, we had the vice chair of the Public Service Labor Union, who was telling us that there's systemic discrimination that force people to speak English first. We had examples from the Customs and Border Security Agency where, again, agents are being asked to speak English predominantly. So is there anything in the pipeline that can improve the situation for Quebec? Well, the objective of the new act is to protect and promote French, not just in French and outside of in Quebec and outside of Quebec, but in Canada as a whole and in the north too. So we see that at the outset in the act, but if we go back to 2021, in terms of the population levels, it's very important for the government to take the necessary measures to support French. Do you see anything? Any initiative coming up soon to improve the presence of French in federal institutions in Quebec? I don't really have any indication in that direction. Well, that's a very worrying observation. But you were also saying that in the absence of clear directives, what would be clear directives to improve the situation? I refer a lot to the appointments of vice ministers or deputy vice ministers. It's actually, if someone is appointed and if they do not have mastery of the second language, then they need to go receive training to reach a certain level. And when they are away for training, their responsibilities should be taken over by someone who is bilingual. Thank you, Commissioner. You can expand on later on, rather, in your answer. So we're now going to go to Ms. Ashton for the NDP from the north of Manitoba. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome, Commissioner, once again to our committee. My first question is based on the fact that in the annual report 2022-23, you recommended to the President of the Treasury Board, to the Minister of Official Languages, and to the Clerk of the Privy Council to measure the real capacity of public senior officials before they're appointed to different positions. How do you think the minister should proceed to implement your recommendations? I think around 2007, 2017, and 18, in the surveys for federal officials, there was a specific section on official languages and the use of language in the workplace. Those questions were removed from the survey, so it's now hard for us to verify or even to have data on this. So to what extent is bilingualism alive and well in the federal government? Francophone or Anglophone officials, to what extent can they use their language of choice? Unfortunately, we don't have this data, so it's hard to take a specific stance. But the last time we had data, I think it was 62% of Francophone officials who said that they are able to write in French, as opposed to 93% of Anglophones. So even at the time, we did not have the same level of ease to use one's official language of choice. But right now, we don't really have that much data, unless I'm mistaken. What is important is that the public service, this might be through the Treasury Board or other mechanisms, has to be in a position where employees are able to use any of the two official languages. Okay, thank you. This is quite worrying because you're still not able to collect data. So in your report, it's mentioned that from April 1st, 2022 to 31st of March, 2023, more than 400 complaints were received by your office because the language profiles of certain positions were not clearly indicated. So why is the government not able to solve this problem, and what do you think the government should do? This is an Article 91 issue. Article 91 says that every position should be assessed in connection with the language requirements. But Article 91 isn't really fully understood by managers. It is a system-wide problem. We can have 300, 500, or 1,000 complaints in relation to Article 91, but it's a system-wide problem throughout the federal government. So what is crucial is that every single time there is a position, the language requirements have to be assessed. We published a report in 2020, and we're now making follow-ups on the recommendations we issued at the time. And we're having a hard time doing the follow-ups. But I would like to see some changes in terms of how Article 91 is understood and implemented across the public service. So people need to be educated on the use of Article 91, and Article 91 does not apply to governor and council appointments and the like. So it's very important to have a bilingual capacity, not just to offer the services, to provide the services, but also come in and work in one's choice of official language in the federal government. Okay, thank you. In the 2023 annual report, you recommended to the President of the Treasury Board to implement their 3-year implementation plan for the conformity of federal institutions when it comes to Article 91 with a deadline of 2025. Do you think that the President of the Treasury Board will be able to make the necessary changes and implement the recommendations? And what would you like to send as a message about the timeline that you indicated? 2025 is around the corner, but what I can say is that There is a group working on this within the government. Well, will they be able to meet the deadline? I don't really know, but they are currently working on this based on our recommendation and our report. A bit less than 30 seconds, Ms. Ashton. Okay, thank you. Will we have another round, a 2.5-minute round? Yes, of course, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you. I will ask my questions in the second turn. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to start our second turn with discipline, please. Conservatives, 5 minutes to be split between Ms. Kuzi and Mr. Godin. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be sharing my time with Mr. Godin. So I will be using the first 4 minutes and then pass the floor to Mr. Godin. So thank you once again and welcome. I'm a member of the committee once again for the second time. So of course it takes a lot of courage to speak in one's second language. Even though I may be making mistakes, I still speak the language. So I'm a member of the parliament from Calgary. But I'm also a member of the shadow cabinet. I'm in charge of Treasury Board related issues, so I will follow up on some questions asked by Ms. Ashton. So there are different ministers who have responsibilities in connection with the official languages, Heritage, Treasury Board, Justice, Immigration, and your office as well. Do you think that it would be better if there is one centralized agency, and namely the Treasury Board, so that the Act is implemented properly? Well, with C-13, the Treasury Board acquired some new responsibilities. In my opinion, they are in charge of the implementation of the Act. And that means, in my opinion, that they should be issuing directives to the rest of the federal government in relation to the implementation of C-13. Heritage Canada also comes into play in relation to Part 7, but it's very important, in my opinion, that there has to be a chief of the orchestra, if you will. The action plan, again, to revitalize official languages, we should not forget about that. That should also be properly implemented. So we need clear direction, sometimes prescriptive, from the Treasury Board for the implementation of the Act. And it's also important to remind ourselves that when it comes to promoting compliance, that's a key point. We had an Act for 50 years, and we had a lot of difficulty with compliance because it wasn't fully understood. Now we have a new Act with new obligations, so it is extremely important that this Act is well understood by the entirety of the federal machinery, and the Treasury Board has an important role to play in that. I believe that it would be much better to have a centralized power. Well, again, an orchestra chief, right? Let's go back to that example. IRCC, Immigration, Heritage, they also have responsibilities with different action plans. But for the entirety of the federal machinery, it's important for there to be a central authority. Are you worried about the future of the French language in Canada? Well, if you look at the statistics from 2021 to our day, it's clear that French has been on the decline in Canada, even in Quebec. And we can find different ways to combat this decline. So from 2001 to 2021, the proportion of Francophones across the country, I think it went down to 23%, but a lot outside of Quebec as well. So yes, I am worried about the vitality of our communities outside Quebec. I'll hand it over to Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, you have 45 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quick questions. Do you think that the Minister of Canadian Heritage should appear before the Official Languages Committee because they are mentioned in the Act? Yes or no? The Minister of Canadian Heritage, so the Minister, should they appear here? Yes or no? I don't know why they wouldn't. Okay, thank you. Second question. Could you possibly provide us a list of witnesses for our study? Yes, we can do that. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, before proceeding, I have a motion that I will table. So if you can please stop the time. Apologies, Mr. Commissioner. You have 5 seconds left, but I still do have the right of moving my motion. You know the procedure, Commissioner. We will now put on pause this session, if you will. So here's the motion that pursuant to Standing Order 1083F, the committee undertake a study on the continuum in education from early childhood to post-secondary in official language minority communities. And I would like to also highlight the contributions of two organizations who are here with us in the hall, Ms. Arsenault Slater, SAMB, and then Mr. Slater from FCFA. So it is based on a request from these two organizations that we are asking for the study. That, in the context of the study, the committee, A, study access to early learning and childcare services in the minority language in Canada, including the quality of childcare services and their impact on the linguistic and social development of children. B, examine the funding, including through the Official Languages in Education program for elementary and secondary schools in the minority language in Canada. C, examine federal funding for post-secondary institutions serving official language minority communities in Canada. D, assess the federal government's capacity to gather data on the continuum in education, including data on rights holders. E, evaluate the impact of the continuum in education on the implementation of the right to education in the minority language enshrined in Article 23 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That, in the context of the study, the committee invites, among others, the Minister of Official Languages and the Minister of Canadian Heritage, the Commissioner of Official Languages, officials from the Department of Canadian Heritage, the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes, the Commission nationale des parents francophones, the Fédération nationale des conseils scolaires francophones, the Association des collèges et universités de la francophonie canadienne, and the Quebec Community Groups Network. 5, representatives from advocacy organizations in each province and territory where French is the official minority language. 6, representatives from school boards or provincial education associations in each province and territory where French is the minority language. 7, representatives from the ministries of education in each province and territory where French is the minority language. 8, representatives from post-secondary institutions serving official language minorities in each province and territory. 9, experts from all areas of the continuum in education in the minority language. That the committee allocate a minimum of 12 meetings to the study. That the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that in accordance with Standing Order 109, the committee requests a comprehensive response from the government. So, Mr. Chair, as you can see, this is very important. And this actually is a request that we've received from around 100 official language organizations, predominantly francophones, as mentioned by the Commissioner. So I think it's important to make sure that bilingualism with English and French continues in Canada. And that this should permeate the education system from early childhood, early learning, all the way to preserve the extraordinary French language, and this should be done through the appropriate channels to provide access to the French language all the way up to the post-secondary level. So I ask that the committee undertake this study as soon as it is possible. We are, of course, going to prioritize the request of the Commissioner in our upcoming meetings, but I move that this request be accepted by the committee. Mr. Beaulieu. Well, this motion would require unanimous consent because we already voted and initiated a study on post-secondary institutions. We've actually completed that. So I think there is significant need that we concentrate on that study. So I would be in favor of keeping that study, and then after that, if we want to focus on other education institutions, I would be in favor. But let's start by doing the study, as we've already voted on.
Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Just to contextualize, it is true that the committee adopted a motion to study what Mr. Beaulieu mentioned, and in order to not do that, we would need unanimous consent. We indeed do agree on many of the comments, and Mr. Beaulieu did ask for a new study, but we do have amendments that we can make to Mr. Godin's motion. However, the commissioner doesn't come here often. I know that he would like to be here more often, but can we continue with our questions and then discuss Mr. Godin's questions next time? Because time is short and we'd like to ask our questions. Otherwise, we'll spend the next 30 minutes talking about the motion while we really want to be talking to the commissioner. I'd like to hear Ms. Ashton, whose hand is raised. Yes, we think that the motion is a good idea. We do have some changes we'd like to bring, and we can send them to the committee's clerk. It doesn't change the core of the motion. It simply widens the scope. I would like to add, though, that I'd like to continue asking questions to the commissioner. I do have another question that I feel is important. I would like to maybe delay the conversation on a motion and amendments to the next meeting. That would be ideal. Mr. Godin, I already know what you're going to say. Well, first of all, we are extending our hand to the bloc because we need unanimous consent to make this study. We've integrated that into this motion. And so from the get-go, we have to ask if we have unanimous consent. Otherwise, then I agree with Mr. Serré and Ms. Ashton that we should delay to the next meeting. But the next meeting will be on the study that the commissioner is talking about today. Well, it will be the next Monday that we're here, but there are no witnesses yet. So we'd need unanimous consent in order to move along. In camera? No, maybe in camera at the next meeting. We are taking stock of this. So we have to proceed and continue with the commissioner.
Donc, c'est ça. Pour être précis.
So, to be clear, the unanimous consent is to revoke the study tabled by Mr. Beaulieu. It has nothing to do with Mr. Godin's motion. We have already agreed unanimously with Mr. Beaulieu. So, what you're asking for is if Mr. Beaulieu wants to retract his study. My question is clear. Do we have unanimous consent to cancel Mr. Beaulieu's study on post-secondary education in order to integrate it into the general report? If the answer is yes, then we can delay the amendments. Otherwise, then let's continue with the commissioner. Mr. Beaulieu, you are the focus of this. I'm going to reiterate what I said. There is unanimous consent. It's over then. So, 5 seconds, Mr. Godin. Mr. Commissioner, you are always welcome here. Thank you for being here. So, on to Mr. Daryl Sampson for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and to your team for being here today. As you know, you play an important role in the government's hierarchy, of course, but also for our committee. That's why we're always pleased to have your guidance. I'd like to start with a sentence from your opening remarks. You said that leaders must lead by example. I think it's very important because it tells us where we're at right now. When I read that sentence, I thought of Mr. Rousseau, and it was a bit painful because he is not somebody who led with wisdom, and it was very obvious. But I'm happy that our government was able to react quickly and say that we disagreed with his statements, and that we said that there were changes that need to be made. So, on to my questions. There are 3 areas that I'm interested in: the deputy ministers and assistants that are already appointed, the new appointments, and those who are in the pool of candidates, so who are waiting to be appointed. So, I'm going to ask you some questions. So, those who are already there and don't fill the criteria of bilingualism, what do we do with them? I understand that there is a bunch of different public officials, but with C13, I don't think it's acceptable that these people continue in their positions if they're not bilingual. What do you think? C13 talks more about the future rather than what is happening now. Those who are in position now have certain protections. I don't really see how we could make any changes to those conditions right now. What we have to do is make sure this doesn't happen again. The importance of the leader is non-negligible. If the senior official doesn't speak both languages, then I assure you that the entire department beneath him will only work in a single language. So I will accept your answer. Now, new appointments. I hear stories like, well, we couldn't find anyone. There was nobody who met the criteria. For example, the RCMP used that excuse. I think it's unacceptable, but that was their justification. I told them what I thought. If there's nobody qualified and you absolutely have to hire someone, then the position should not be permanent. It should be temporary until you find the right person, because it's their responsibility to align with the Official Languages Act. Do you agree? The criteria for the position are bilingual. The person has to be bilingual. If the person cannot respect that criteria, they need to get training. But but their colleagues need to be bilingual. But we're talking about people who don't follow such training even after their appointment. So perhaps you can include that in your report. And now, let's talk about the pool of candidates waiting to be appointed. Because we're talking about senior management here, or upper management. These people technically meet the criteria. One of them is bilingualism. So how is it that somebody finds himself in that pool of candidates if they're not, if they don't meet that criteria? You're talking about the pool of candidates at the government, and you're talking about assistant deputy ministers, for example, and they must have met the criteria for bilingualism. Often it's people who are outside the government who have difficulty meeting that criteria, but people who are already in that pool do respect that criteria, do meet that criteria. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes. So 2.5 minutes, Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On one hand, You see that the former act was not respected and there was no political will to ensure that it was respected. Do you think that there will be political will now for C-13 to be respected? What we're seeing with the government right now seems to be the opposite. I'm an optimist. That's my nature, otherwise I wouldn't be here. I think that we should give them an opportunity. It's been less than a year since it's been implemented. There are things that are moving, and there's some complexity with regards to this act. For the commissioner, it's complex as well for our bureau. But there's a lot to do within the government in order to promote respecting criteria. But we saw it with political appointments. There are less and less bilinguals, therefore people who speak French, who are appointed. So it doesn't look good. In order to help and, move things along, do you think that you need to be more aggressive and perhaps speak publicly a bit more? I think you already do it, but I have the impression that it's always been the same message from the commissioner, where they complain but nothing is done. Indeed, the changes are very slow to come about. I'd like to come back to what has already been said about senior officials who they should be bilingual. We hire people who are unilingual, expecting them to take classes, but should we not do that ahead of time? Maybe they should get the training and then make sure that they pass their test before being hired. Or if there are no candidates that speak French, then the results of the exam be taken into consideration. Thank you for your comment. Your time is up. Ms. Ashton, for 5 minutes as well. Or 2 minutes and a half, rather. Oh, that's a shame. So back to the question on the RCMP. Mr. Commissioner, you talked about the culture at the RCMP. Mr. Duhem was part of our committee at some point, and when he was a witness, he said that we sometimes have difficulty respecting the law fully. So he himself said it. Here's our concern. It's about the culture. Of course, capacity is also an issue. We think about the news a lot. For example, during extreme climate events that happened in the Atlantic, alerts were not communicated on time in both official languages. This year, we expect to have a lot of forest fires again. The minister himself said so. Preparation at all levels, whether it's the RCMP or another organization, and the obligations of that they must respect, it could be a life or death situation. Why do you think that this culture persists, and what must be done at the RCMP in order to solve this problem? A few years ago, we published a report on emergency situations for official languages. What we noticed is the following, and in all cases, the work had not been done in a preventive way. The mechanisms and systems were not in place in order to respond in the official languages in a timely manner. So if a message is sent in one language and a certain percentage of the population gets that message, but then 20 minutes later the message is communicated in the other language, then it's already too late. After 10 to 20 years, 10 to 20 years, we always had this excuse, and they would tell us that it was an emergency. But this is emergency preparedness that we're talking about. So everything has to be done immediately in both official languages. And if the message is sent in both official languages at the same time, 98% of Canadians will understand the message. So after this many years, it is shocking to me that we don't have a mechanism in place in order to react to these emergencies. Ms. Ashton. Thank you very much. Mr. Commissioner, we asked you to be a witness here so you can share your knowledge with regards to linguistic obligations, language obligations related to the process of staffing or making appointments to key positions. We have 2 meetings, and we hope that you will appear again. So we would like to know who the most relevant witnesses would be in your opinion. For 2 meetings, we'd like to have at least 2 witnesses. We have 2 one-hour panels with 2, ideally, witnesses for each panel. So we'd like you to please, as soon as you can, provide us with a list of witnesses. And this ends our public session. I will ask members to stay during the next little while, and we will go in camera.